Hello friends, and welcome to Figure Study, where we appreciate the form in Transformers. Today I'm going to be taking a look at Mastermind Creations' Kultur. I know very little about this, aside from just what people have mentioned offhand in reviews. Apparently Kultur is from the IDW comics, and he is the leader, I think, of the Decepticon Justice Division? I think that's what it is. I don't know what that means. And also, Kultur is, of course, the third-party name for him. His name in the comics is Tarn, which, again, I don't know anything about any of this. But I have him, and I have him because I thought he looked cool in the videos and photos and stuff that I'd seen. So here we go. He's kind of a weird, boxy tank car thing, and I'm not entirely sure how to parse this vehicle mode. It's not bad. It curls up really nice, it compacts nicely, and it kind of works, but at the same time, there's certain things about it that is just kind of looks kind of random and slapdash. I don't know. Like I said, no prior knowledge to anything related to the IDW comics or Tarn or any of that, so I'll just feel it out as I go. As weird as this mode looks, it's not bad. It's just a little bit, like I said, slapdash. But I do admittedly kind of like what's going on here. It's this interesting mix of colors with the purple, silver, gray, and I feel like this is black, but in these lights, this actually looks like a really dark blue, which works also because, I mean, blue is in purple. Either way, not terrible. And yeah, there's just not a lot to this mode. It's because of the treads and the compactness and the big guns on top. I want to call it a tank, but I don't know if that's really what its intended purpose is. It kind of looks like something that you would see on like an 80s Saturday morning cartoon, like a G.I. Joe knockoff bad guy vehicle or something, especially with these little silver spike fins in the back there, and no discernible cockpit. Not that it would need one, because, I mean, who's going to be driving this? Yeah, looks pretty good. The color combinations do work pretty well. And there's a fair bit of little details in there, like the molded treads, the nicely painted silver mechanical bits on the treads, the bits on the sides of the vehicle, and then not much going on in the back here, and some unfortunate, unsightly light plastic from where the sprues were cut, but And yeah, it's, I don't know, I don't really know what else to say about this vehicle mode. Getting rid of the turret real quick does have the thing where it's got the missiles on the insides there, and it's got that in both compartments, so that's a thing that you can do. And because why not, just pop that up, and there's, I think those are supposed to be missiles on the inside there too. And it's cool that they put those details in there, but who's really gonna use those? The turret is fine. One thing that kind of bugs me about the turret is the fact that the two guns on the sides there, they move independently, so it's super easy to accidentally bump one out of alignment. Then you have this kind of derpy looking cannon. I guess it would be nice if they either had like a ratcheting system that they both connected to, or if they both kind of met in the middle and clicked together so that they could turn simultaneously. I don't really know. I'm sorry, I don't have a lot I can really say about this alt mode because I just don't have that experience with the comics or with the character, so let's just move on to size comparison, shall we? Now, for what it's worth, his alt mode, despite being kind of wonky looking, does compact pretty well and is still pretty big. It's definitely bigger than a Power of the Primes Deluxe. I feel like you could probably fit two of Dreadwind in that space that Kultur takes up. And just because I have more figures from the same line, we've got Kultur with Mastermind Creations Nitro. Well, okay, technically Nitro's not based on the IDW version of a character. It's a remold of their Hot Rod that was based on IDW Hot Rod, and this remold is for Nitro Convoy. It's the same general aesthetic, it's made by the same company, so I'm just doing a size comparison, so deal with it. But then I do have Dicamus, and Dicamus is from the same kind of IDW thing, because, you know, based on IDW Roadbuster. And Dicamus is, it's interesting, like the two characters I think are, like they're roughly, they feel to be close to the same weight, but Dicamous looks significantly larger than Kultur because Dicamous spreads out more, as you can kind of see there, whereas Kultur kind of smushes in a little bit more. So even though they're not necessarily, it's not necessarily one using more plastic than the other, it looks like Dicamous is massive next to Kultur, even though Kultur's a tank and Dicamous is a car. It still works, and they still look good together. I mean, Kultur looked good sitting next to Nitro, too. They all look good together because they're part of the same line, made by the same company, all following the same aesthetic. Anyway, that is it for size comparisons, and that's really kind of all I can say about this tank mode, because, like I said, no real knowledge of any of that stuff. So we'll just go straight into the robot mode. How about that? And here we have Kultur, or Tarn, in robot mode, and oh boy, this is probably the figure that best encapsulates why I've been really digging Mastermind Creations' work lately. Not that I'm a huge expert on it or anything like that, and really I only own like 3 figures from them now, counting Kultur here, but he does such a perfect job of illustrating why Mastermind Creations is probably, at this point, my current favorite third-party manufacturer. So what I mean by him being this perfect illustration of why I really like Mastermind Creations' work is the fact that he's got paint all over the place, but it's in really distinct spots, for one thing. So he's got a very simplistic overall color scheme in terms of both the colors and like where everything's placed, but in a way that works exceptionally well. Like he's got lots of paint up in here and some, painted bits down here and so on, but they're just like one solid area is colored, then it's back to the regular plastic, then another solid area is colored, then it's back to the regular plastic. So where you've got, paint, nothing, paint, nothing, paint, nothing, paint, nothing, and just the way they've laid out the color on him, the way they painted some details and left others to just be plastic, it's technically kind of a simpler paint scheme when compared to a lot of other high-end like Masterpiece and third-party stuff. But the way it's all laid out here is kind of perfect. Granted, yes, no background in the character or comics or anything like that, but like even without that knowledge, just looking at this, I can't necessarily find anything that I think needs to be painted or colored differently. Then there's the overall sculpt, which is fantastic. I mean, like I said, no familiarity with Tarn whatsoever, but this is a fantastic looking robot. He's got the big shoulders, which I always love big shoulders. He has a very intimidating silhouette without being absurdly beefy. And he just looks like someone who would lead a team called the Decepticon Justice Division. And then there's that transformation, the engineering, all that stuff. It's very simple. Very easy to get into, very simple to do, very easy to learn. It's really a basic transformation, but it's really effective. And this does a really great job also of illustrating the fact that sometimes you don't need to have super involved transformations to have something be very effective. And all of that together is why I feel like Kultur is sort of the perfect example of why I've been really digging Mastermind Creations stuff. He's overall kind of simple, but it's not a bad simple. It's we had a thing we wanted to do, and we knew exactly how to do it without any extraneous stuff going on. Like there's no fluff to this figure. It's exactly what it needs to be. And that is why I've been really enjoying Mastermind Creations stuff. Now, when I first got him out of the box, I was a little bit unsure because his thighs compared to the rest of him looked a little bit thin. And when you're looking at him like straight on, not posed or anything, like he does kind of, like if we just do this, like here you can kind of see he looks a little bit thin in the arms and the thighs with these really chunky shins and big feet and all that. And that had me kind of like, oh, I don't know, his proportions are a little bit strange, where he's like beefy in the outer areas and then skinny in others. But then just the simple matter of like turning his thighs a bit and spreading his legs out and just giving him a little bit of a twist. And suddenly you're looking at him from a slightly different angle and everything looks much, much beefier and much chunkier. And it's a really cool look. And I'm constantly reiterating myself when I say this, but again, I'm speaking as someone who has no idea who Tarn is and has never heard of Tarn before seeing videos of this figure. So yeah, with none of that history going on, Tarn, or in this case Kultur, is just fantastic looking. And now going back to the color scheme, which I sort of glossed over before, here it works so well. I love what they do with the color here, and I know it's based on the comic design, but like this kind of bright pink purple along with the darker purple and the black that might actually be super dark blue, it all comes together to make it look sort of like he's glowing in places, and those are some really cool highlight effects. The gold accents everything really nicely, and there are no big chunks of him that look like they could have been painted. Like even the thighs that look like they may have possibly at one point, like before he was finished, you could have said they needed something. They've got little bits of paint detail in there, and even some paint going down the sides here. So yeah, it's no. Nothing on this guy really needs any extra paint. Yeah, it's just so great. Love the colors, love the paint job. The silhouette on this guy is utterly fantastic. He doesn't have a ton of detailing, but he has a lot of it where it matters. Like the sides of the legs, you've got this molded detail that's also painted silver. The sides of the thighs, like I pointed out. The knee behind the giant gold knee pads also has some molding in there. There's like a little bit on the hips and the midsection. That really, really nice chest thing that's also the front of the tank mode. The treads also, like I love the texture that these treads bring to the shoulders. That's a cool design. It's also like a little bit of molded detail, almost looks like a vent on the forearm there. And this little bit on the inside of the elbow, no less, has been painted. And then his backpack, which also has a bunch of detail that's been painted on the inside that you don't see unless you're looking at him from the back. They went all out with this, and it looks so good. And speaking of looking so good, I am super duper into this mask. Like a lot of people, I am surprised that they were actually able to pull it off without some kind of massive lawsuit, but I'm glad they did because it looks great. It's like a slightly more angular and angry looking Decepticon logo, and it works really, really well. I'm a little bit less into the non-masked face. Like the head sculpt isn't bad, but the face itself doesn't look particularly unique. I mean, I like this really, really, really dark, somewhat metallic face, and those eyes, they are seriously popping from that black head with the really dark metallic face, but it's just the sculpt isn't super interesting. Also, he's got these like little bits that sweep back that I'm not really feeling that, but I do like that they painted the sides of the head silver. Yeah, I don't know, I'm just not really into the non-masked face. I like that it's an option, but not really into it. Fortunately, you can just plug that back on, and there we go. And I am totally with Vangelis on this. I think it'd be great if those red eyes actually popped much better from behind the mask there. I think it works okay like this, though, because the way that the mask is shaped, even if you can't see the red, you can still make out those eyes, or eye holes in this case, perfectly. There is no mistaking that those are eye holes. Yeah, they don't pop like the red, but they're not hidden or anything like that. And then we have the arm cannon that my initial thoughts were I was kind of lukewarm to it because it does stick out kind of far and kind of gets in the way of the shoulder there. And I did mess around with pulling these off the individual barrels off and putting them in his hands like guns. But ultimately, even though I was a little bit at first, I do think he looks best with this on. It's just a nice bit of asymmetry, and I like how it kind of, like, this is all of his, aside from the white, this is all of the colors on his robot mode in one condensed spot. So it adds a little bit of color asymmetry as well. I'm really into pretty much everything this thing does. I also love how easy it is to just make him look menacing. They just have him looking to the side and tilt his head ever so slightly, and just looks great. Anyway, let's move Kultur off to the side here so we can do our size comparisons. There he is with Power of the Primes Deluxe, and he gets quite large. Not quite leader size, I don't think, but definitely bigger than a Voyager. I do have a bit of a soft spot for Transformers that have surprisingly large robot modes when their alt modes compact like really nicely, and that is definitely this. And bringing in the other two Mastermind Creations figures that I have, you can see that there's definitely a cohesive design ideal going through this entire line, and it looks really, really good. I mean, yes, okay, it's based on the comics, and the comics are, of course, going to have a cohesive design, but still, sometimes liberties are taken, and these all just look really, really good together. I also think it's funny how the overall mass is distributed a little differently, where Dicamous is sort of just a little bit tinier, but like definitely thick throughout, whereas Kultur is definitely taller, and he's burly, but not quite as beefy as Dicamous there. It's a bit of a random aside, but if any of you are on the fence about Mastermind Creation stuff, I urge you to look into it because they make really, really cool stuff. And with that, I think I've said just about all I can about Kultur. Oh, actually, before I wrap up, I'm just gonna move his arm there so you can see he also has a little detail under the arm that has been painted. And also, I love that he has that ab crunch. I mean, yeah, it's part of the transformation, but I don't know. I think ab crunches are fun. You can get some pretty cool posing possibilities from that. Anyway, yes, as I was saying, I do believe that is going to do it for Mastermind Creations Kultur, their version of IDW Tarn. Everyone says that this is a great figure, and I'm just kind of echoing that sentiment at this point, but I do want to point out one last time, even though I've been saying this throughout the video, I do think it's important to note that I'm saying this guy is awesome and kind of a must-have for anyone who's able to get him. I'm saying that from the perspective of someone who has never read the IDW comics and has no idea who Tarn is. This figure has been my first real exposure to any of that. And the whole reason I wanted to get him was based entirely on the toy reviews that I'd seen in the past, because he just looks like a really, really cool robot. Anyway, that's enough about what I think about Kultur. What do you all think? As I understand it, there is quite a bit of buzz, or at least there was quite a bit of buzz around this guy when he came out, so I wouldn't be all that surprised to find that a number of you also either already own him or have been contemplating getting him for a while. Is there anything on Kultur that you feel like they should have done a little bit differently? Anything in terms of paint or sculpt or engineering, any of that stuff? And now, I haven't been keeping track of Mastermind Creations' planned releases, but wishful thinking, if there were any other figures that you would want to see Mastermind Creations put out in the reformatted line based on the IDW comics, what would you like to see? Because I have no background in the IDW comics whatsoever, like I said, so I don't really know who's out there that they could do, so I can't really weigh in on this one myself, but whatever you think, I am curious. And in terms of their back catalog, are there any figures that Mastermind Creations has put out that have been kind of selling out everywhere, that they haven't restocked or anything like that you'd like to see? Because I know they're doing another run of Spartan. I really wish they would do another run of Commodus. Also Titanica. I have been wanting to get my hands on Titanica ever since I got Dicamous, and I am kind of bummed that I can't find Titanica anywhere. Whatever your thoughts, feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. And while you're at it, also feel free to like or subscribe. Any of those things would make me a happy Rob. And remember, art is more than meets the eye.